we've got lunch to eat. Walking through Green Park, another oasis in the midst of this garden town. And on the other side of Green Park, we're going to come out at Shepherd Market. Another nice collection of cafes and restaurants and pubs. You have a choice of a dozen eateries here, ranging from the simple sandwich takeout to an elegant sit-down meal with a tablecloth restaurant. Or in between, you can have the sidewalk cafes, or like us, go on into a pub, for a traditional English lunch. Wash it down with a pint of bitter or half pint of Guinness, if you will. Oh, you can also have sodas, lemonade in a pub. You don't have to drink alcohol here. And they're particularly good for lunch, not so much for dinner, but at lunchtime you can get some nice hot meals in a pub, and then we're replenished, we're fortified, and we're on our way through the tube system into the underground train to our next adventure, which is the Tower of London. Yes, in a few minutes we'll be taking you to the important historical monument of the Tower of London. You'll see the Beefeaters and the White Tower and other great elements of that big castle. But first we're going to show you a few more sights of town. Typical row houses of London. Probably half the people of town live in this kind of Victorian townhouse. It's very comfortable, livable scale of urban design. It's not a high-rise, but it's fairly high density, so there's lots of people and attractions packed into town. Once again, into the middle by Leicester Square. Of course, this is also the theater district, along with movie theaters. There's probably 25 stage plays performed within 4 blocks of Leicester Square. And here too you can buy your half-price tickets. And that'll cost you about $28 for very good seats. Other shops around the Leicester Square Covent Garden area include a lot of old bookstores and antique stores, as well as little specialty shops, one-of-a-kind items. Passing once again through Trafalgar Square, we're on our way to the Embankment tube station to ride the tube out to the Tower of London. And it's another great photo op. Get that backdrop of National Gallery and the fountains and St. Martin in the Fields Church. Big bronze lions. Trafalgar Square is always a pleasure to walk through. Perfect temperature for walking. It's in the low 70s. Here we are in the month of June, and London is typically cool at that time of the year. Morning workers on their way to the office. We're waiting around for 9:30 a.m. so that our one-day train tickets will work. For £2.50, £2.60, you can buy a ticket that's good for all day, but you can't start before 9:30 in the morning because that's rush hour. You got to hang on to that ticket because it'll get you off the train as well. And you want to be able to reuse it, especially since it's the one-day pass. And it's also good on the double-decker buses. It's a direct tube connection from the Embankment station right over to the Tower of London, so it's real easy to get there. We get off here. Just takes about 10 minutes. So what we have here is the original Roman wall. Original Roman wall that went around the first settlement, because London was founded by the Romans. Like many of the great cities of Europe, the Romans got here first, and they saw that this is a good place to cross the river. It was basically an ideal spot because the river here was still navigable all the way out into the sea, and yet it was narrow enough that they could build a bridge. So that was the first London Bridge constructed by the Romans. And you see the typical Roman brickwork there, those long horizontal bricks. That lets us know for sure this wall is almost 2,000 years old. And the Romans, they stayed in England for about 300 years. And they had a tremendous impact on England and English law, much of which comes originally from the Romans. They went all the way up into Scotland, up just beyond Hadrian's Wall and Wales. They never got to Ireland, though. And the Irish, even today, are still stubbornly independent. And from here, we have a great view of the tower. Over here, the Tower of London. This is a building that was constructed over many hundreds of years. You know, it grew and grew, it evolved over time, and the earliest part of it, the White Tower, which is in the middle, is actually the oldest building in London today, because most of London burned down in 1666 with the Great Fire, but the White Tower didn't, and it was first built by William the Conqueror in 1078. You know, the Normans came over 1066, of course, and shortly afterwards he built his main fortress right here, which is just this central castle that we'll be going inside to take a look at. Once you're inside the walls of the Tower of London, you can go inside the buildings. It gives you a good idea of what life was like in a medieval palace. Yes, there's some spiral staircases that you go up and down, but it's really not a lot of walking once you're in the Tower of London. Walking along the battlements of the wall, you have a beautiful view looking out over the River Thames and Tower Bridge. A series of 3 concentric walls guarded the inner keep. Cannons litter the grounds, and you want to make sure to make a beeline to the Jewel House to see the crown jewels. Later on in the day, lines form to get into these places, especially in the afternoons. It's much better to come to the tower in the morning. You get your clear photos of the Wellington Guard, and there's various armories as part of the grounds here. You'll see details of the buildings, and you can listen to the beefeaters and hear their tales of the history. These guys are experts.
Now this tower has been used to contain many notable prisoners. Sir Thomas More, Sir Thomas More, once Lord High Chancellor of all England, a man for all seasons, a great friend of King Henry VIII, was held in the lower chamber on orders from his good friend King Henry VIII. Now also held in this tower, in the upper chamber, was a young lady called Princess Elizabeth, later to become Queen Elizabeth I of England. Now she was held there on orders from her half-sister, Queen Mary Tudor. On the death of Queen Mary Tudor, Elizabeth was pronounced Queen of England.
You could spend nearly an hour walking along with the beefeater and hearing their stories, but we've peeled off. We're enjoying the sights such as these ravens. They have pet ravens that wander the grounds of the tower. And you certainly want to go inside the White Tower. Here's a scale model showing the entire complex. Inside the White Tower, you'll find this old Norman chapel. It dates back to the origins, the late 11th century, when this building was constructed. It's the second oldest Norman chapel in England, after the chapel at the Dover Castle. There's a great collection of armor here, a reminder that one of the functions of the Tower of London was to store the weapons, store the ammunition, store the armor. And there's the armor of King Henry VIII. It's a huge set of armor. A grand display. They've just recently renovated the interior of the White Tower, and it is now state-of-the-art perfection. Even the back corridors are fascinating to see the innards of a medieval castle. It's a rare opportunity in London, the oldest surviving building. And it's an easy walk, a flight down back to the main floor. There's a gift shop down there, passing the cannons, and then back outside onto the grounds. You'll find a row of Tudor cottages. This is where the superintendent of the tower lives today, and there's other various offices inside here, the headquarters. They date back to the Tudor times of Henry VIII. Final rest before we exit and get some good munchies at the fish and chip stand right here. It's one of the better places in town, actually, to get a nice meal of fish and chips. The tower makes a nice climax to our trip to London, and actually it's the grand finale of our tour, for the trip is now over.